Well, hello there. I'm Rafael de Furia, back at it again to talk a little bit more about life abroad, living abroad, and all that other fun stuff for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. This week, I wanted to talk about Portugal and some of the areas that people think about when they move here. Granted, yes, I've only been living here actually since December, but Portugal, I can say, is a country that I'm pretty darn familiar with. And there are various places within the country that people start thinking about when they are considering a move out here. A lot of the first places that people end up seeing, that they end up being the most interesting to them at that time during the research phase, at later stages sometimes, I guess, phase out, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I think it's also important to understand what are some of the reasons why some people may want to go to certain parts of the country, so maybe that you can better understand what it is that might be the right fit for you. This is just based on my own personal opinions and my personal experience, but I think it's about time we get into the episode. But before we actually get started, a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible through Patreon, the one-time donations, as well as the shirts, mugs, onesies, and more. Really thank you also very much for helping to allow this project to be able to continue. If it weren't for you guys, I don't know where this project would be right now. But I think it's about time we get started. So roll that intro. Just before we get into the rest of this episode, I've got a comment question of the week for you guys. If you've thought about moving to Portugal, where in the country do you feel like really attracts you, that really kind of pulls at you? Or if you are currently living in Portugal, where in the country did you choose and why did you choose it? Today in this episode, I would like to maybe try to focus on some of the more popular areas that really stand out when you're starting to do your internet research in Lisbon, the Algarve, and then comparing not necessarily specific places, but types of places. Lisbon, this is probably, in my opinion, one of the places that really stands out the most, just because, up until not that long ago, a lot of people around the world maybe weren't that familiar with what Portugal had to offer, living in Portugal and so on. It's something that really has caught on more, I would say, in the past less than decade, maybe the past 5 years. I've really personally noticed a huge ramp up. Maybe I started to notice a little bit of a trickle, maybe about a little bit over 10 years ago. But really, things have been ramping up more and more and more. Even the market in Portugal for finding an apartment rental or for purchase, things are, especially for rentals, things are moving very quickly, especially in the more desirable areas. But Lisbon ends up being kind of one of the first places that, in my opinion, people think about because of it being one of the main places that you would know about if you're not from here. It's the capital. There's a lot going on there. It's a fun city, and I will say it's probably one of my favorite cities on earth, if not my very favorite city. I haven't been there in forever, other than the airport for my connection flight getting here, but it is a fantastic city. It's got great food, great people, great music, great everything. I just love. It's not for everybody. And I will say that Portugal isn't for everybody. But also when we're talking about Lisbon, we're talking about also the area around it. You have the area on the other side of the river, on the other side of the bridge. But then what ends up also being quite popular with expats would be Cascais and that area around there. That ends up actually being quite a bit more expensive. And I've seen those prices really shoot up. Like if you look over the past 10 years, it's almost horrifying to see. But the Cascais area, just outside of Lisbon, might be what you might consider a little bit more posh, a little something going on there. But Lisbon also, there's a lot going on there, and the prices there are also quite expensive. You can find cheaper parts of town and more expensive parts of town. It depends on where you are, and it depends on what is available. In Cascais, you might have more of a laid back, kind of relaxed, like almost beach town sort of vibe there. Lisbon, you do feel like you're in a city, but you don't feel like you're in a hustling, bustling city where everything is overgrown like New York. You feel like you're in a city, just not New York City. I don't know quite how exactly to put it, because also the buildings there aren't massive. They're large. They're definitely large, but they're not as overwhelming as some cities you can go and it's just skyscrapers and it just feels like it lacks a soul. And no, I am not saying New York lacks a soul. It's just a very different feeling. But also, Lisbon is probably going to attract more younger individuals, families, or retirees maybe who are doing a little bit better in life, might be interested more in the Cascais direction. I know there are also families that are more interested in bringing their families out to that area and maybe just outside of Cascais, because you have international schools, you have more space for kids to grow up. But in the city, you have startups, you have different things going on, you have fun restaurants, you have restaurant pop-ups, there's fashion, there's a lot of different interesting things going on there. So maybe if you're a young entrepreneur or a couple and you're digital nomads and you're looking for a cool, interesting hub to be in, Lisbon could be that place. And I would say actually that to an extent also goes for Porto. I'm not going to get into Porto so much in this video, but some of what you could think about regarding Lisbon can be applicable to Porto, but not necessarily. As far as the community and what's going on there, and I'm not saying like the city itself, what I'm saying is more what you can find available as a young entrepreneur or even older. There are things in place for you that could make your life interesting. I mean, this is kind of what it seems like Portugal is trying to set itself up for right now, with being very attractive to digital nomads and entrepreneurs and crypto and this and that and the other. It's in a very interesting position. But of course, in Lisbon and Porto, you're going to find more evening events and clubs and bars and this and that. But say the Algarve, for example, you're not necessarily going to give up the ability to go to clubs and bars if you go to this quieter part of the country. But on the southern coast, and this may not make some people so happy what I'm about to say, but in my personal opinion, I really find that the Algarve is really great if you're looking for two things in life. Either you're looking to retire and you're just wanting to have the beach life or beautiful views and vistas of the ocean, because also keep in mind, there are a lot of people who are interested in Portugal because they think it's the Mediterranean and the Mediterranean lifestyle. And yeah, there's a little bit of the Mediterranean lifestyle and culture that ends up being part of Portugal. But the Mediterranean itself doesn't start until Gibraltar. That's over in Spain, or not in Spain. It's the southern tip just outside of Spain. It's a different country, different people, wonderful place. One of my favorite places I've ever been to. It's a cool, really cool little city. If you do ever have the chance to go there, I highly recommend it. But here, Portugal is on the Atlantic. But also you have to consider, relatively speaking, yeah, there's inland areas that aren't on the beach. But relatively speaking, in comparison with a lot of places, the beach is almost never really all that far away. You can always get to a beach, even if you're somewhat inland. Yeah, okay, it'll be a little bit of a drive, but it's not going to be like living in the middle of like Switzerland or Germany where you're very landlocked, or even in, I don't know, let's say Colorado. You got beautiful lakes and rivers, don't get me wrong, but it's not the ocean. Personally, I more prefer lakes and rivers, but also Portugal has a ton of rivers and lakes and places that you can go and enjoy. But if you're looking for calmer waters, maybe you're not going to find them because it's the Atlantic, at least on the west coast. On the southern coast, in the Algarve, that is where, yeah, you can start finding some calmer waters, but it can still get pretty choppy out there. But again, if you're looking for that laid back, relaxed life where you have a bit more space and you can own like a plot of land, like a good sized plot of land, and be able to just have nobody, even no neighbors. You can also find this in places, I guess, up along the Silver Coast. But the Silver Coast, I'll save that for a different episode. And it's actually, I would say, interesting for different reasons, because you find yourself in between some larger cities and you have easier access to them than what you might have in the Algarve. Again, the Algarve, it's great if you kind of want to get away from the world and just have that retreat, so to speak. But then there's the other thing that I think that is, if it is what you're looking for, the Algarve can be great for. This is also dependent on the world situation and what's going on, of course, because this is YouTube. You can't use certain words, otherwise, yeah, stuff happens to your content. I'm not going to say. Anyway, that's for a different topic for a different day, but pre-2020 and the events thereof and where we are currently in the world right now, partying and drinking, and that was very much a thing in some of the cities there. Not every city. Like, I've seen people there start drinking at 9 o'clock in the morning and then finish drinking at 7 o'clock the next morning. There was always something open or always something to do. It was always like kind of shocking to see. But there's a lot to do if you're into that. If you want to go partying and clubbing and doing those sorts of things, or drinking and having just a fun time, if that's what a fun time is for you, you can also do that. Then you also have water sports. You can go boating. You can go parasailing. That's a thing down there. Surfing. So if you're looking for those sorts of things, that can be really attractive in the Algarve. But it's missing some of the part that for me I would find attractive about Lisbon, and that would be working and maybe making work happen for myself. So would I be between the two? Maybe I would lean a little bit more in the direction of Lisbon personally, just because practically speaking, I feel as though I could sustain myself more easily there. Also, Lisbon, you have the airport there and they're making a new one, but in the Algarve, you have Faro, the airport there. Yeah, you can get around a lot of Europe, but it's not necessarily an airport that you're going to find a ton of direct flights to, but it depends on where you're trying to get to. Whereas Lisbon or Porto, those are major airports. So you're going to find that those airports have flights to many locations around the world. Like even when I moved here from Italy, for example, I was able to fly from Venice, Bologna, or Verona. I was able to fly either to Lisbon or Porto directly, and also the times of day. And anyway, it's not important for this episode, but you have to consider, like, if you're coming from the States, are you going to have family that you want to see regularly, or that you want to have a jump off point for a family emergency, or if your friend's getting married, your cousin's getting married, your sister or brother? It can be nice to have that kind of access. So for me, where I live now in Braga, and this is kind of where I'm talking about some smaller cities, larger cities that maybe aren't on the main kind of expat kind of scope that people really think about when they are looking at moving abroad. Until recently, Braga hasn't been as much of one of those locations that people have really looked at. But what I have seen is that there are a lot of people who will go to Lisbon for like a year or two or a few, and they decide they like the city, but it's not quite the right thing for them. And they want to get out, but it would be nice to have access to it. Or they just want to move to a smaller city and maybe have some of the nice things about living in a city, but not feel like you have all the hustle and bustle around you. So there are people who've left Lisbon to go to here in Braga, or to go to the Algarve, or to find other smaller places, Coimbra and so on. Because you can actually in Portugal, because it's pretty small, like we're not talking about a huge country here, and also not a huge population either. You can find yourself in the countryside with access to a major city, or like Braga, for example, where I am. It's a small city, but there's always something happening here. It's not like you'll have in Lisbon or some of these other places a like huge partying scene or clubbing or so on. And that for me is perfect. I don't like that. It's not what I'm into. I'm not a fan of coming home at night when there's just drunk people all over the place. It's not my style. It's not my flavor. It's not what I look for in life. Not that I'm saying that, Lisbon is only like that. No, it's kind of relegated to certain places. But it's nice to be able to live in a livable place. Whatever. It's nice to be able to have a place that you can not necessarily feel like you have to have the hustle and bustle of a city, but you can have some of the nicer aspects of it. Like you have accessibility to events, movie theaters. This is actually one huge thing that I will say about Portugal. Entertainment. I don't know if I've mentioned this in recent episodes. I feel like maybe it's possible, but television and movies here in Portugal for adults are almost always in their native language with subtitles. So in comparison with Italy, for example, almost everything was dubbed there. And if you wanted to go see a movie in its original language, you would have to go to a special theater for a special showing of that movie. I remember I saw one of the Star Wars movies, maybe it was the Solo movie in Bolzano, and they were only showing it one night in English for the whole month. That was it. That was the special English movie of the month. Granted, there are other places where you could go, like maybe in Venice, there's, I think, a couple of theaters there where they do have a couple of showings throughout the week in English. Whereas here in Portugal, if you go to the movie theater, you will see, like, again, Star Wars, because just the example that I'm using here, and I'm a huge fan, of course, shocker. If you've been following me on Instagram, you'll know. You will find that you will go and see that movie, Star Wars, for example, and see it in English. I remember years ago, I can't remember what the movie was. It doesn't really stand out in my mind just because it must have not been such a great movie. But I went there and it was like, oh, wait, the movie's in English. I didn't even consider, going to see a movie in another country. It might not be in English, but it was in the original language with subtitles at the bottom. And this is the same thing also for TV, that if you're watching television shows from another country, you have like a lot of American programming here. Maybe not everything will be American, but say if you have TLC shows that you like and you're one of those people and you enjoy a little bit of the trash TV of 90 Day Fiancé, you will be able to find that on television here in English. Unlike when I was in Italy, for example, if you see a show from another country, like I remember seeing actually one of the first nights that I was in Bolzano, like when I first arrived to Italy, like for moving there, not like the years that I'd been before there, but I'll never forget. I turn on the TV as soon as I get to the AirBNB because I just want to crash. And I'm not somebody who really watches TV anyway, but I just like, I need to crash and relax. And I said, oh, The Jeffersons. Hey, I like that show. Big fan. But it was in Italian. It was definitely an interesting experience to see Mr. George Jefferson speaking Italian. I'll never forget it. But if you were to see the same show here, it would probably be in its original language. There's plenty of Portuguese television here as well, so don't get me wrong. But this is another thing. I don't know even how I got onto this tangent. Anyway, I'll end this tangent here. But, talking about like access to movie theaters, for example. So there's a movie theater here in Braga, and it's a pretty nice theater from what I've been told. I haven't gone to it yet. But yeah, if I want to go see a movie, like I could probably walk there if I wanted. It'd be a long walk, but I mean, you take a bus, you're there in a few minutes. It's not that far away to really get to most of these things, especially in a smaller city like Braga. Or you could be outside of the city and you have a 10-minute, 20-minute drive here. Or you could find yourself between Braga and Guimarães, another city that's close by, that's a similar size. And if you're in between the two cities, then you have access to both. And I know there are people who live outside of Porto, for example, or outside of Lisbon, maybe even an hour or two. And if they feel like they need that city living or that city experience, they can go and take a train there or drive there, whatever it may be. That depends on your location and what you have access to. So it can be really attractive from that perspective to be not in the main city, but have access to it. And you could be in a smaller city, a smaller town, and have more of a kind of down-home Portuguese experience. And there's something really nice about Portuguese small towns that I enjoy. But then also you have to take into consideration certain things like connectivity and internet, for example. If that's important to you and something you need for work, you might have a little bit more difficult time to get really great access. Like you wouldn't probably have fiber if you're out in the middle of the country with nobody around. But you could find that maybe you'll have really great cellular service. So that could get you by, and who knows? So these are things that you would want to look at. Do you want the city experience, or do you want to live maybe on a small beach town where you have little old ladies, like there was the one episode of Rick Steves where he's walking around, these little old ladies that are selling barnacles. Like they're edible. You can eat some types of barnacles at least. And like you can find those experiences, having the little old people talking in and out the windows, kind of like what you see in Italy. It's a little different here. Or one thing that I really enjoy, especially in smaller cities, is that you'll have the municipal market. And that'll be a place where you can go, and maybe some places they'll have more fish, some places they'll have veggies or meat. The one here in Braga actually is really cool because it's a mixture of a actual like market, like vegetable open air kind of market. It's inside, but they also have an area that has food, prepared food, like that they can make on the spot, or a cafe. Like it's a dining hall. Maybe I'll show it in a future video. If you guys are interested in seeing what I'm talking about, let me know down in the comments section below. But it's nice to have access to that. Yeah, in Lisbon, you can have access to these things. And actually in Lisbon, if I'm not mistaken, there's actually quite a large food kind of court there that you can go. It doesn't have like the veggies and so on that you can go and purchase, but you have access to these things, like these more kind of fun experiences in a place like Lisbon, but you have maybe more practical experiences that are also fun, and not just like restaurants, but restaurants and your local shopping in a municipal market. To have the restaurants attached to the municipal market may not be the norm in a lot of places, but just something to consider. And then also actually just going back to the Algarve, when you go to some of the they have like municipal fish markets there, and they've got all kinds of options of things. Like the Algarve, if you are into fish, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the episode where I showed you guys around here in Braga here on YouTube. The Algarve, I mean, if you like fish, that is the place to be. That is hard. In my opinion, I don't know if I've been in a place that has better fish. And yes, even in comparison with Italy, or even in comparison with the northeast of the US or the northwest, especially the northwest, coho salmon and Alaskan salmon, ain't nothing better. But here you also have a lot of different types of fish that you might not necessarily see in the States. But also here, like the way that they prepare it, and you can just, anyway, I could rant on that at no end. Maybe I'll do a full episode in the future on fish in Portugal, just because that alone, you have a ridiculous amount of fish dishes here. But I wanted to, in this episode, focus on a little bit more of the practical side and kind of what are you looking for? And to maybe guide a little bit of maybe a possible decision that somebody out there might be trying to make. Are you looking for that more relaxed beach vibe? Then yeah, you can find that in the Algarve. You can find that on the Silver Coast. But do you need to be maybe more in a city? Then you can find that in Lisbon or Porto. Or maybe you're looking for something that's a little bit more livable. Maybe you want to have your kids out in nature and having fresh air. Portugal has some beautiful, clean air here. So you could buy yourself a good plot of land that they can go out and play on, or rent even. You don't even have to buy. And have your children raised and being able to play in the dirt and to be not stuck in a city. So it depends on what you're looking for and what you require, because also, even if you do have kids, you have to consider, do you want to send them to a Portuguese school or to an international school? I know that if I were to have kids at some point, I would probably be more likely to lean in the direction of wanting to send my kids to a local school rather than an international school. But of course, I'm not a parent, and that's something that I haven't had to make a decision on. I just have a lot of friends who do have children, and I have friends who've decided to go one way and the other way. And there's a difference, and you see the kids as they grow up, and you see even, I have older friends, even in their 50s and 60s and so on, and some of their adult children, you can see a big difference between the ones who went with the local system and the ones who went through the foreign system. Huge difference. And I'm not talking about just Portugal. I'm talking about a number of different countries here. Or homeschooling. This is something that in Portugal, there are a lot of people who are interested in Portugal because of the ability to do so. So yeah, there's a lot that Portugal offers in such a small place. So definitely worth considering. But I think this actually may be a great place to end off this episode for this week. So huge thank you to those of you who've tuned into this episode, and also for those of you who've subscribed on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you all so much, and especially a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible on a regular basis through Patreon or one-time donations, or through the shirts, mugs, onesies, and more, of course. All of the links are down below here on YouTube. But of course, as always, I'm Rafael de Furia. Thank you for joining me on another Friday night for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll see y'all next time. Later.